everyone! Your first tutorial this week is on writing effective thesis statements. This is so very important because everything about your essay will hinge upon a good quality point to prove that is written in specific enough terms to convince your reader to pay attention and to adopt your point of view. Okay, so take a look at the screen before you. Here's an attempt to define a thesis statement so you understand the kind of thing you're working toward. The thesis statement needs to make a claim that is debatable. It has to be something that others might disagree or agree with. So this thesis statement cannot be a question. It has to be a statement. It has to be written in your own words because it's your paper, not someone else's, and generally it's going to appear at the end of your introductory paragraph. Okay, so look at the next screen. Notice that we're honing in on the idea that the good thesis statement will make a claim. It doesn't mean you have to be reductive and wind up with an either-or proposition. It's an interesting, vibrant perspective that you can support and defend in the paper. It has to be more than an observation or a mere statement of fact. Here's what I mean. The statement, "America is violent," is merely an observation, a statement of fact. It doesn't give me anything to prove, and it's rather bland. But if I said Americans are violent because they're fearful, now I've made a claim, and I've got something to try to prove to my reader. Another point's important too, though. I have to choose a topic and a thesis statement that's worth talking about. If my approach is so bland that no one wants to argue, well, it's not a very good thesis statement at all, and ultimately the paper is going to be a real drag. Here's another screen for us to think about. You'll notice in the first column, we're trying to pose that a good thesis is restricted, unified, precise, and arguable. So what we mean by restricted is that we're focusing on the ideas to be developed in the paper, and we can signpost pointing out some of those ideas in the order they'll be discussed. But look at the last two examples. If I just made a claim, pollution is a serious problem, blah. First, everyone knows that. It gives me nothing to argue, and it's just too general to be interesting. But if I made a claim about a specific pollution problem in a specific area, now I've got something worth trying to prove. Jump down to the row on unified. You'll notice in the weak example column a very disjointed thesis statement. The thesis is of questionable quality anyway, but notice in this instance I've got two ideas going: that many of the silent letters in English were once pronounced, and spelling was standardized along with the changing of punctuation. Really, it just seems like a pileup of facts with no relevance to each other. But in the last column, at least I've got some way of connecting and subordinating ideas. The thesis statement also needs to be precise. So take a look at row 3. You're given the advice that you should avoid vague language and generalities, words like interesting, inspiring, unusual. The attempted thesis statement, "Plato's Republic is one of the most fascinating and brilliant books ever," it's too vague, and I really couldn't prove that anyway unless I was willing to talk about all books. In the fourth column, though, I've got something I could actually try to prove when I have the sentence, "By linking the issue of personal justice to an account of justice in the city, Plato's Republic connects ethics with politics and invites reflections on both." Well, now I've got something I could actually try to prove to a reader. Okay, we'll jump down to the fourth row, wherein we make the claim that the thesis needs to be arguable. We've already tried to get at the idea that the thesis needs to be a statement that can be supported and defended by facts, but it can't be a fact itself. In the weak example column, you'll see the sentence, "Art means different things to different people." Well, that's evident. There's nothing to argue there. No one would disagree with that. It would make a very lame paper if that's what we set out to prove. A corollary to this one might be a sentence like, "Everyone has his or her own version of the American dream." Well, it's not a good thesis statement because it's purely a statement of fact. But if I change that thesis statement to something along the lines of many people's version of the American dream is wholly misguided, mad pursuit of stuff instead of the concept of happiness. Well, at least now I've got something to try to prove. I can show examples of people in mad pursuit of accumulating stuff and the way in which that stuff leaves a void inside most individuals. Now I've got an actual thesis I could work with. So now that I have a thesis statement, where do I put it? Well, I definitely don't want the thesis statement to be the first sentence in the essay. That's playing my hand too soon. Generally, I'm going to have that thesis statement as the last sentence in the introductory paragraph. That means I've got to figure out a way to write an introductory paragraph that captures the attention of my readers and builds up to the claim I want to try to prove. That lesson on writing strong introductory paragraphs will be posted tomorrow, so stay tuned. For the time being, struggle with writing what you consider to be an effective, interesting thesis statement that gives you something to prove rather than merely establishing a point of fact.